and knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe! Because knowledge is power!
Thank you very much. I guess it is a touch of irony and maybe the cycle in a strange way completes itself. Two Alabamians, one white, one black, both from poor sharecropper background, debating a paramount issue of race, debating about a subject that was really an invention because nature created no races. Not only the word itself is artificial, but the tragedy around it is artificial. Now, if I say the tragedy is artificial, I cannot say the pain and the murder is artificial. You felt that, and that's real. I am saying, around a word that was totally unnecessary and a situation that was invented, not only have people suffered, but the inventor has suffered misconceptions, and the inventor have cheated his own children out of the truth about history and the truth about how different people must relate to each other if we're going to have a world where man will walk with some kind of peace and some kind of dignity. Right. We keep calling for black history when really history has no color. We need to call for honest history for all of the people of the earth. I do not believe in the concept of curricular inclusion. Because if you include me into a curricula that is wrong, it is like pouring clean water into a dirty glass. That's right. I believe in corrective history. I believe in honest history. And you don't have to take white people out of history to put black people into history, but put them in their right place. I think the achievement of the Iceman Inheritance as a book is not that it is a great masterpiece of literature, but that it is a revelation coming from the side to the victims. And it is a revelation for both sides, saying things that we both must know, a situation we both must confront if we are going to end the cycle of murder so that both of us can walk in peace. And if we as a people who've been the victims cannot arrive at a point where we can say the murder stops right here. We cannot come to power and form a black branch of the Ku Klux Klan. We cannot waste our time developing theories of race when the concept of race is a myth. We cannot go into religions and use them as a rationale for excluding other people or oppressing other people when all organized Western religions are male chauvinist murder cults.
That's right.
All organized Western religions have made God ungodly.
That's right.
Anybody that says his God gives you the right to enslave another people have made God ungodly.
That's right. That's right.
And anybody who says that his God chose him over other people have made God into a bigot.
Yes.
If God is love, God does not choose one people over another. Now, my complication around the concept of race and color began as a Baptist Sunday school teacher when I wanted to teach Sunday school at an early age. And so therefore I had to read the Bible, pronounce words like Deuteronomy, and I did. And then when I had to go through these little tracts, little fold-out Sunday school lessons sent from a white Baptist publishing company in Tennessee, and when I looked at all of those angels, all white, and I had a great-grandmother who told me God was love, God was no respect of kith and kin, and he is the Father of us all. It was those angels that confused me. All the people that died, not one little brown or black angel sneaked into heaven. I began to understand something had gone wrong with God's book. Somebody had tampered with God's book. Misuses were being made of the holy book. Where am I? I look in the book, I see Moses born in Africa, goes down to Ethiopia to marry Zipporah. Moses gets white, Zipporah gets white. I see people going to the land of Punt, which is present-day Somalia. They get white. People going to Kush, the present-day Sudan, where I found blue black people, they get white. I couldn't find any black people in Africa, and the Bible unfolding in Africa. I couldn't even find any black people. I'm confused now. That I'm wondering about all of it. And I'm in Georgia, a teenager. I'm mowing lawn, airing dogs, doing all kind of chores to keep body and soul together before school and after school. I'm being pushed off the sidewalk by white thugs. And one time I almost pushed off a bridge. In the meantime, I'm being told that this is superior people. Now, why does superior people need to prey on a lonely, straggly delivery boy, lawnmower? Kid ain't bothering nobody trying to make a buck. Here shining white people's shoes, polishing all those buttons and all the officers' clothes. You're trying to keep it together. I mean, well, if you got to pray on it, you sure can't be brave. You got to take 6 of you who want to pray on him. So, why is the bravery? What's the superiority? I'm going to suspect something.
Greed and selfishness. Greed and selfishness.
Now I'm working in their homes, mowing their lawn, washing their windows. And sometime after the man of the house is gone, I sit down. The lady of the house calls me in. I finish my chores, I sit there and she complains. She sits there, she wants somebody to talk to. She's just complaining about her husband. Not a single thing in the world I can do about it. But listen, but she'd rather have some boy mowing the lawn to listen to nobody to listen at all. So once I listen, I go out and mow the lawn. So I'm working for rich white people who have good libraries that they never use. So when I begin to borrow books and they never missed them, I start bringing them back. So I'm getting a decent education while trying to survive. I began to a habit of picking up leaflets out of the street, putting them in my pocket, I read it later. So I get to my desk in school, start putting out my leaflets. I picked up. One fellow grabbed the leaflet, take it to the teacher. The teacher shakes her head. Oh, John, you're such a good boy. Why would you do a silly thing like this? I'm ashamed. I have to report this to the principal. I don't know what the hell this is all about. Take it to the principal shakes his head. So I thought you were the finest young men in this school. Why would you do a thing like this? I don't know what they're talking about. Finally, he hands me the leaflet. I hadn't had time to read it. The leaflet says, "Niggers, read and run, the Ku Klux Klan rise again." In my innocence to learn how to read, I'm picking up things out of the street because I never had a book in my house other than the Bible. I had picked up an advertisement of the group for the Ku Klux Klan. But I continued to read and continue to search. And when I want to impress the teacher, I asked the white man that I worked for a book on African people in history. And he said in our vernacular, he let me down slow. He said, "John, you came from a people who have no history." He said, "But one day you will have history. One day you might be a great Negro like Booker T. Washington." I didn't know anything about Booker T. Washington then, 20 years later before I investigated him. Finally, I read an essay called "The Negro Digs Up His Past." And I knew that we not only had a history, but in ancient history, we were older than our oppressors. We were older than slavery. And when I discovered how old I was, I would walk up that. But white people said, "You just got here." Young people. Now, as they once said in early black vaudeville, I said that to say this. But we need to look at, not to demean anyone, but to put things in proper perspectives, is that the conquest of the mind, the propaganda of superiority based on color, the propaganda of bravery based on John Wayne and 1,000 heroes riding into the sun. One of the greatest achievements of European people, that they captured the mind of other people, and their victims never asked any question. Have you ever seen one lone white man lynch one lone black man?
All right, come on now, come on.
They don't come by one, they don't come by two. Have you ever seen it done without a gun? Have you ever seen the odds even We have not asked the question about the bravery of people who Hollywood has made brave. We see one man killing 25 Indians and chasing them away. Have you ever seen one man meet one healthy Indian with no gun?
I know.
We are at fault in some ways because we haven't asked the right question and to get the right answers for all of this. Have we ever looked deep enough into our history to understand that over half of human history was over before anyone knew that a European was in the world?
That's right, that's right, that's right.
Now, how did you manage all those years having built enduring societies, not only without a jail system, but without a word in your language that meant jail?
All right.
And how then, if you achieve that, and there is proof that you did, how did you ever become inferior to those who have achieved nothing resembling this in their humanity? Why then have you not studied the structure of our family to understand that Africa without foreigners had a family structure that in itself was a mini industry, in itself had a built-in Supreme Court, and that for 3,000 years that family structure has been under siege, and it still is. The conqueror must always destroy those things that make you feel good about yourself.
Tell the truth, man. Tell the truth.
And you, because the conqueror came, laughed at your gods, you adopted his God. Laughed at your clothes, you adopted his clothes. And sometimes laughed at his women, and you lust after his women. The conquest of the mind was his greatest conquest. Why then that this juvenile delinquent from a thawed-out icebox in Europe take over the world? Why didn't you think it out? You had a humanity in your culture that made you hospitable to strangers, and you never studied this stranger. You didn't know him then, you don't know him now. Europe breaking up.
Okay.
They spent their wealth on stupid walls, ammunition, savings and loans, gulf encounters. Now they've dismantled a system, no matter how bad communism was or how bad you think it was. Everybody in it had something to eat. Everybody in it had an apartment, though it may not have been the shiniest one, but it was out of the rain.
All right.
Now they're going to change that for a system of privatization, but they're going to have homelessness.
Tell it, man. Come on with it. Come on.
Communism did not fail, the communists failed. Now what's this got to do with the subject of the evening? It's got something to do with the fact that when a European takes over anything, a religion or a political order, he must exploit it for his own use or he must destroy it.
Greed and selfishness. Greed and selfishness.
Nothing is in peace. And when he come into your home, you assume, because you transfer your humanity to him, you assume that he's got the same humanity as you. And you have not asked, as you should have, what is your mission in visiting my house? And if the enemy is at my door, will you be loyal to me or loyal to my enemy? Let's get this straight before we start anything else. But instead of asking these questions, you invite him for dinner. Your mentality had never adjusted to dealing with the people who you can invite for dinner, who will rape the cook and enslave the horse. You had never dealt with the people who will use religion as a handmaiden for enslavement. Now, when I say that the African gave the world no religion, I say it with pride. Because what the African had was higher than religion. It was spirituality. Foreigners codified that spirituality, formalized it, dogmatized it, and turned one against the other, then turned to their gods to justify the enslavement of people outside of the religion. Out of this formation came the chosen people myth. And out of it came the true faith myth. If you got the true faith, that means all other faith are false. And if that wasn't enough, after the Romans disgraced themselves in the mismanagement of Christianity that was against their temperament in the first place, they opened the door to Islam. Now they said that their God said it's all right to enslave anyone outside of the faith. I wish one day one black person, at least some of the black scholars who are Muslim, would read some of the literature about this religion. Stop jiving about it. This is the black man's real religion. Real friend. You had no religion until the 7th century AD. This is the black man's true religion. I got nothing against you. Join anything you want to. But you convert it into everything that touches your life. Waste your time and your money must become an instrument of your liberation or thrown into the ash can of history. You got no time now. This is the least original of the world's religions. It came into being so fast, moving to a vacuum created by the corruption of Christianity by the Romans. It had to take a few saints from Zoroastrianism, a few saints from Judaism, until it had put itself together. It's a composite religion. Right. Now, one of the reasons why we have not understood this in relationship to the whole concept of race in Europe, we have not understood Nile Valley civilizations. Too many times we use color when we should concentrate on culture. Okay. It matters less than a damn whether all Egyptians were pure black. All right. I have not made that claim. That is not the claim that's being made. The idea is that these were people in the main who came from the physical body of Africa. And no European would come all the way to Africa and build a civilization of this nature before they built a shoe in Europe or a house with a window.
Come on! Who built the pyramid?
If the first book appeared in Europe around 1250 BC, written by someone named Homer, and we're not too clear whether Homer was man or woman. Now that civilization was old and in decline by then. The pyramids and the Sphinx was already there. The Hebrew entry had come and gone. So we keep arguing, who built the Sphinx? People say, slaves built it. No slaves has ever been this skillful in human history. You can go to the pyramids right now, and those blocks of stone are so close together, they've been there 5,000 years, you can't even launch a playing card in the seams. They've got no bonding agent. Slaves don't have this skill. What benefit is to a slave to do a thing like that? Tell me. Now the mulattoization of Egypt began with the Hebrew entry in the 17th century, 1700 BC. It continued with the Hittites and Shepherd King, 1600. And after this period, 1,000 years of some kind of peace, and the Assyrians came, 1666. The Iranians, 550 BC. The Iranian was so bad that Africans cried out, "Oh God, if you can't send me a liberator, send me a conqueror that will show mercy." Now you know what happened when the little Greek, Alexander the so-called Great, knocked at the door. Now this was the first purely European aggression. And he wasn't that aggressive because it wasn't necessary. He was to some extent a benevolent conqueror, a first-rate diplomat, a second-rate warrior, but that's another lecture. But he did open the door for the ultimate appearance of the Romans. All right, we're dealing with racism now. And this is something we've got to deal with. The Romans and the Greeks were smug and exclusive, but they were not racist in the present sense, although Aristotle said quite a number of things that can be interpreted as racism and might well be racism. Prejudice in itself and preference in itself is not racism. The racism that we are dealing with right now came out of the 15th and the 16th century. The rise of Europe after the Middle Ages, the Crusades, and the beginning of the slave trade in the 15th and the 16th century. This is what we got to really deal with. Europe, during the Crusades, partly religious, partly hustlerism, partly a Raven party. Right. But after this was over, famines, plagues, Europe had lost almost 1/3 of its population. They're looking for an outlet. During the Crusades, they had found some things over and above anything they'd seen in Europe. fine fabrics, beautiful designs. They brought these things back into Europe with the Africans, Arabs, and the Berbers controlling Spain from 711. They've discovered something called soul. They began to use things. The Africans and the Arabs and the Berbers had preserved the maritime skill coming from China, the leading maritime nation of that day. Some of this information fell into the hands of Prince Henry of Portugal, called Henry the Navigator, although there's no evidence that he ever navigated anything. With the birth of European maritime skill, putting boats out to sea, Europe started looking for Asia and the sweets and spices of Asia, something to put on that gosh darn awful European food so they could eat it. Now they wanted a rationale for what they were doing. The rationale that they were using for the Crusades now extended into the rationale for the conquest of other people. Manifest destiny, divine white right. If you're not using it, it belongs to me.
Come on, come on.
Now, the Africans and the Arabs argue among themselves that lost part of Spain. Spain and Portugal would go to the Pope to settle a dispute. 1455. The Pope would issue an edict, and he would say, you two good Catholic nations, stop fighting among yourselves. You're both authorized to reduce to servitude all infidel people. Now, the justification for the slave trade had been set in motion. Portugal had achieved a minor victory in the Battle of Ceuta by capturing a small enclave in Morocco. Portugal had freed itself from the domination of the Africans and the Arabs. 1240. The Africans then, the Almoravids, had been challenged that same year by another group of Islamic warriors, the Almohades. We Stanley Land Pools were the story of the Moors in Spain. Read John Jackson's chapter on this called Africa and the Civilizing of Europe. Because there are many good works on this subject, dealing with the resurgence of Europe in the world. The Europeans began to come down the coast of West Africa, and mostly Portuguese. 1438, they began to take slaves out of Africa. In 1442, the nations in inner West Africa, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, had a golden age, not only during the slave trade, but in spite of the slave trade. And we keep missing this. We think the slave trade, nothing else happened. The great city-states in West and East Africa continued until the Arabs began to destroy from the north and the Portuguese moved up from the south. Then the Portuguese and Arabs met, therefore forming the largest slave trading post in East Africa, one of the largest in the world, at Zanzibar, mostly by the Arabs from Kuwait and the Arabs from Oman. Omani Arabs and Kuwaiti slave trade. Now you can have sympathy for Kuwait, and I think you might need to. But don't forget now, the Arab slave trade lasted 1,000 years before the European slave trade. and ask your Islamic brother to do a little investigating on it, and if they want to read something on it, tell them read UNESCO documents 2 called Slave Trading in the Indian Ocean. And tell them also, if you want some additional material, read Sir Henrik Johnson's The Colonization of Africa by Alien Races, and Sir Roger Copeland's work, East Africa and its Invaders, and the Cambridge History of East Africa. And if they say that all you're telling me about reading Whitey's books, you tell them that there's some extensive work in history that getting from Whitey to black hair haven't had time to write. We don't get those grants. We don't get the kind of grants we can sit down and devote 3 years to one job. We don't get that kind of money. If we get enough money at all, it might cover us for a year, and we got to go back to the classroom and get our rent paid. See, we're very human beings, you know. That we can't go to the electric company and say, I'm a scholar, so I'm not paying my electric bill this month. We can put in there and say this out. My point is that now we're reaching a high point in the concept of race to justify the slave trade and the colonial system that will follow. A lot of this justification, this rationalization, is coming out of Europe. A lot is coming out of the Catholic Church. I don't think I'm beating up on the Catholic Church, because England was in a swing position between Catholicism and Protestantism. And if you think the Catholics were bad now, you wait till those English got in there. They did it better. They were organized gangsters, I mean, they territory. I mean, they sailed up the Gambia River, took 10 miles on each part, on each side, established their trade. They made the slave trade a business, cold-blooded business. This African slave trade helped in the economic rebirth of Europe. Haiti and Jamaica are 1/3 of the economic wealth of the colonial power, then coming from those 2 islands. They had the greatest amount of slave revolts, mainly because they were pinched the hardest and pushed the hardest. Race was a factor now. It's becoming kind of a justification. People that the slave preachers said, slaves, obey your master. That's the main thing they want him to listen to. They destroyed his gods, now they want him to listen to another god. In the United States, they outlawed the drum, they outlawed any form of African fractions. They weren't quite as ruthless in the West Indies, but ruthless enough. Now we see race and color playing a major role in the expansion of Europe, in the outer world, and the recovery of Europe in the outer world. You should read Father Bartholomew de Las Casas' little work, The Disruption of the Indies. He tells you of the impact of Columbus on this part of the world. He says from 12 to 25 million indigenous Americans were put to death. He described the encounter in Mexico. He's called the first historian of the New World. The book was so devastating, the Pope had it brought to Rome and locked the manuscript up for 200 years, nobody could read it. And right now, if you go to a good library and ask for it, somebody will look at you kind of strange. You should make a mission to ask for these old books. Father Bartholomew de las Casas, The Disruption of the Indies. And read the books about Father de las Casas. Read some of the new things on Christopher Columbus. I'm sorry that Michael Bradley's book, The Columbus Conspiracy, has not been published in the United States. I was promised last year that the book would be out in January. No attempt seemed to be made to get it out. This would be the ideal time to get it out. I read the book thoroughly. I enjoyed it because Christopher Columbus was my favorite anti-Western heroes. I think one of the great fakes of history, even before I read Michael Bradley's book. I researched him again after he gave me some new information to dig up. There's also a book called Conquest of Paradise about Columbus. There is documents on West Indian history by Eric Williams. Now I'm going to close in something that has no ending anyway. One thing about the Baptist tradition, you take your text, you leave your text, you come back to it before the end and let people know that you know your text. But once you get started, it's hard to stop. What I'm saying is that we have survived the longest Holocaust in history.
That's right, that's right.
And let no one say they have a monopoly on the word Holocaust.
Yeah.
Fate has not spared us for some casual reason. Some people have been hit less than we, and they're now extinct. We need to look beyond tonight's lecture. We need to look at the racism and the expansion of Europeans to the Pacific. The wholesale murder of people in the Pacific, the destruction of people on the island of Tasmania, people in India. We need to take a holistic world view of the tremendous cost to the world for European expansion, and it wasn't necessary. I maintain that had Europe entered a genuine partnership with the people of the world, slavery wouldn't have been necessary, racism wouldn't have been necessary. They would not have had to turn their souls into pretzels in order to create a rationale for their world domination. The domination of the world by any one people is rather stupid. And any one people who think they must dominate the world must be terribly insecure. It was not your bravery that brought this about, it is its fear. It's lack of bravery. Not the man who looks at my strength, lack of it. Then what will we do in the world of tomorrow, considering there's a billion of us on the face of the earth? We have to start producing instead of consuming everything. We must reclaim the continent of Africa, all 12 million square miles of it. That's right. We must create the kind of humanity where all men can walk in peace and walk with dignity. Yes, yes. I didn't say forget, and I didn't say forgive, right. And I'm not advocating nonviolence. Very good. I'm advocating the strategic use of violence whenever it is necessary for your self-defense. All right. have great gifts for the world. Years ago, when history was young, the great river valleys of Africa, we sent people down the Nile from inner Africa who formed a composite nation, later known to the world as Egypt. That nation and its literature laid the basis of so much that we know as the world's religion and its social thought, and so much that we now call a civilized state and humane thought. What we have to do is to form a partnership with ourselves. I say, find a mirror and look at that partner staring back at you and say with confidence, partner, you and I start a revolution to change the world. We choose to do it right now.
All right.